So here's how you would take your image and create layers. So first you need to identify them. The background is going to be layer 1 because it is the first or background layer. I need to frame this up so that I kind of know where I'm working from. So I have layer 1, my background. Then what's the second thing, kind of furthest back? I'm just kind of working my way towards the front. Now you might find that there's a few tricky areas, so just I'm doing this in pencil so that I can redo any areas because I'm noticing these little windows might be more like layer 5, maybe it needs to be 6, so I'm kind of identifying those. I can then shade them to create a visual option, and I actually really like to color code them. So this is an option with anything, color pencils, highlighters, crayons, pastels in this case, whatever you've got. This helps me see what my layers are. You could also do this on a piece of printed out paper, and I would just write my numbers, right? Just like this. I printed this out really dark. I would probably contrast it. All right, so now I need to think, I need my backing, and I'm just gonna use cardstock, right? And now I need to think about cutting out my layers. I'm gonna cut and trace them. You could also trace this using graphite instead. So I would shade my back, then I would trace over my lines, and with my graphite that would actually transfer. But I'm going to show you cutting and transferring. So I'm cutting out layer 2, and I'm actually cutting around the whole other part because that's going to build up my layer. And so I'm actually trimming a little bit inset on the parts that are not layer 2. Now I'm going to start with layer 3. So I'm just going to keep checking my work as I go. Now if I'm using this little cardboard cutter, I can use it for detail. If I use small sawing motions, you can't. You got to be careful with how you hold it. It is not as sharp as an X-Acto, but it is still sharp. And I still tend to use my scissors for sharp angles like you saw there. All right, so I have all my pieces. I'm going to kind of arrange them, and you can see how that's creating that relief. All right, so I need to check my work and trim as needed, and then I'm going to assemble. I'm going to start with the back. And I usually kind of go back and forth. So I'm now going to start with my top layer. And if I have small details, I might cut them out. I'm using a needle tool to poke through to make these kind of lines. And then I'm cutting through with my needle tool. And this can be an interesting way to add not only depth, but also texture if I'm using corrugated cardboard, because then you can actually see that corrugation. I could cut deeper and remove that all the way if I wanted. I'm going to keep assembling. And I keep checking my work to make sure there's no trimming that I need to do that I forget and then can't do later. Now if I have a little gap here, if I'm worried about that falling down, I could cut a small piece to kind of shim underneath there. Make sure you cut off anything that'll stick out. Now I didn't actually cut out the leaves of this plant because I figured I could just kind of make it up. You know, you do get some artistic license in how you create your shapes.